In the dusty streets of 1881 Tombstone, Dr. 189. Helena Winters thought she was a failed surgeon whose patients kept dying under her care until she discovered the accident victim's wounds were made with surgical precision by someone who knew exactly where to cut. But when the killer standing over her body turns out to be the very doctor the town trusted most, how many other medical failures were actually cold-blooded murder? Dr. Helena Winters stumbled backward as the heavy wooden door slammed shut in her face. Through the gap beneath, she could see Mrs. Patterson's boots pacing back and forth inside the cabin. Another patient refusing her help. Another family choosing to let their loved ones suffer rather than trust the lady doctor who had arrived in Tombstone, Arizona territory just 3 months ago in the spring of 1881. The desert heat pressed against her black medical coat like a heavy blanket. Helena adjusted the leather strap of her father's medical bag and walked toward the main street. Her boots crunched against the dry dirt road that connected the small wooden buildings of this mining town. The sound of hammering echoed from the blacksmith's shop, mixing with voices drifting out of Murphy's general store. She paused outside the barber shop where old Mr. Hendricks was getting a shave. Through the window, she could see him pointing in her direction while talking to the barber. Both men shook their heads and frowned. Helena knew what they were saying without hearing the words. The same things everyone whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. That woman doctor kills more people than she saves. My cousin died right after she treated him. Why did she even come here? Helena touched the small silver locket around her neck. Inside was a picture of her father, Dr. William Winters, who had taught her everything about medicine before dying of fever 2 years ago. He had believed she could help people. He had been wrong about many things, but Helena still hoped he was right about that. A group of mining wives stood near the water well in the center of town. When they saw Helena approaching, they gathered their children close and moved away. One little girl with blonde braids looked back with curious blue eyes before her mother pulled her along. Helena walked past the saloon where piano music spilled onto the street. Several men in dusty work clothes sat on wooden chairs outside, playing cards and drinking from brown bottles. They stopped talking when she passed by. One man spit tobacco juice into the dirt and muttered something that made the others laugh. The sun was getting lower in the sky, painting the mountains in the distance with orange and purple colors. Helena reached the small cabin at the end of town that served as both her home and her medical office. She climbed the 3 wooden steps to her front door and sat down in the old rocking chair on the porch. From here, she could see the silver mine where most of the town's men worked during the day. Black smoke rose from the mine's buildings, and she could hear the distant sound of machinery. Helena opened her medical bag and looked at the bottles of medicine and surgical tools inside. Everything was clean and organized, just like her father had taught her. But what good were clean tools and fresh medicine if nobody would let her use them? Make an end to the bleeding, please! The woman's scream cut through the afternoon air like a knife through cloth. Helena jumped up from her porch chair and grabbed her medical bag. The voice had come from the direction of the silver mine. She ran down the dusty street, her black boots kicking up small clouds of dirt with each step. Other people were running too. Men from the saloon, women from their houses, children following behind their parents. As Helena got closer to the mine, she could see a crowd gathering near the main building. Someone was lying on the ground, surrounded by people kneeling in the dirt. Helena pushed through the crowd until she could see what was happening. A woman with brown hair was sitting in the dust, holding her left arm against her chest. Blood was soaking through a torn piece of white cloth wrapped around her arm like a bandage. Her face was pale as fresh milk, and sweat dripped down her forehead despite the cool evening air. Rebecca. A tall man with a thick mustache dropped to his knees beside the woman. His clothes were covered in black dust from working in the mine. What happened to you? Rebecca Caldwell tried to speak, but only a weak whisper came out. Her husband James looked around at the crowd with desperate eyes. Someone get Doc Patterson from Bisbee. Ride fast. That's a day's journey, said Sheriff Morrison, removing his hat. She'll bleed out before he gets here. James Caldwell's face went white. He looked at his wife, then at the crowd of townspeople standing around them. Nobody moved. Nobody offered to help. Helena realized they were all waiting for someone else to take charge. Helena stepped forward and knelt down beside Rebecca. Let me look at that wound. No. Rebecca's voice was stronger now, filled with fear. Not you. Anyone but you. The words hit Helena like a punch to the stomach. Even bleeding and close to death, this woman would rather die than accept help from the failed lady doctor. Helena opened her medical bag anyway and reached for clean bandages. James Caldwell grabbed Helena's wrist. "My wife said no. Your wife will die if someone doesn't stop this bleeding," Helena said quietly. She could feel everyone watching them. The whole town was waiting to see what would happen next. James looked at his wife's pale face, then at the blood still flowing from her arm. His hand shook as he let go of Helena's wrist. "Do whatever you have to do." Helena began unwrapping the blood-soaked cloth from Rebecca's arm. The crowd pressed closer, wanting to see what the lady doctor would do. Sheriff Morrison held up his hands to keep people back. "Give her room to work." As Helena peeled away the last layer of fabric, she expected to see the kind of injury that happened around mines, maybe torn skin from sharp metal or cuts from broken tools. What she found instead made her stop breathing for a moment. 3 perfect cuts marked Rebecca's arm too clean, too exact for any mining accident she'd ever seen. Her father's voice echoed from years of medical school. "Nature tears and crushes, but only trained hands create surgical lines." Helena's pulse hammered against her throat. Someone had tried to kill Rebecca Caldwell with the skill of a doctor, but something had gone wrong. The cuts missed the main artery by mere inches, close enough to cause massive bleeding, but not close enough for instant death. "Rebecca, listen to me carefully." Helena kept her voice steady while her mind raced. "These aren't accident wounds. Someone did this to you on purpose." Rebecca's eyes went wide with terror that had nothing to do with blood loss. Her lips moved without sound, then formed a single word: "No." "Who examined you recently? Any doctor visits in the past week?" "I can't," he said. Rebecca's head rolled back, consciousness slipping away. Helena pressed clean bandages against the wounds, her training taking over even as questions exploded in her mind. Only 3 doctors worked within 50 miles of Tombstone. Old Doc Patterson's hands shook too badly from drink to make cuts this precise. That left herself, and she knew she hadn't touched Rebecca Caldwell. The mining foreman, Bill Caldwell, knelt beside Rebecca, dirt streaking his weathered face. "Doc, there was someone else. A traveling physician came through last week. Real gentleman, spoke fancy like he came from back east." Helena's blood turned to ice water. "What was his name?" "Called himself Dr. Kane. Edmund Kane, I think. Said he was checking on folks in the outlying settlements, making sure everyone stayed healthy." Bill's voice cracked. "Rebecca said he was real thorough. Spent near 2 hours examining her." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. A stranger doctor. Thorough examinations. Surgical precision wounds. Helena had heard whispers from other settlements, unexplained deaths, patients who seemed to recover then suddenly took turns for the worse. "Where is Dr. Kane now?" "Still in town, far as I know. Set up practice in the old Murphy place on Silver Street." Bill looked down at his wife's pale face. "Why? You think he did this?" Helena finished wrapping Rebecca's arm, her movements quick and efficient. The bleeding had stopped, but bigger questions remained. If this Dr. Kane was deliberately harming patients, how many others had suffered? And why would a trained physician choose to hurt instead of heal? "Get Rebecca to my office," she told Bill. "Keep her warm and give her plenty of water when she wakes up. I need to pay a visit to Silver Street." Silver Street lay quiet as a graveyard, most folks hiding indoors from the brutal heat of late afternoon. Helena paused outside the Murphy place, a rundown building with peeling paint and broken shutters. No sign announced Dr. Kane's presence, but lamplight flickered behind the dirty windows. She knocked twice, her knuckles sharp against weathered wood. "Come in," called a smooth voice from inside. The doors open. Helena pushed into the dim interior, blinking as her eyes adjusted. The room had been transformed into a makeshift medical office. Clean white sheets covered examination tables, glass bottles lined wooden shelves, and surgical instruments gleamed on a metal tray. The setup looked professional, almost too perfect. A tall man emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a pristine cloth. His smile was warm and practiced, the kind that put nervous patients at ease. Dark hair, gentle brown eyes, and soft hands that spoke of careful work rather than hard labor. "You must be Dr. Winters," he said, extending one of those soft hands. "I'm Edmund Kane. I've heard quite a lot about your work here in Tombstone." Helena kept her hands at her sides. "Have you now?" Funny, because I just heard about you for the first time today. Dr. Kane's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind his eyes like clouds passing over the sun. Word travels slowly in these parts. I've been treating patients in the smaller settlements, places where doctors rarely venture. Like Rebecca Caldwell? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kane's hand moved almost invisibly toward the instrument tray, then stopped. Ah, yes. Poor Rebecca. I heard about her mining accident. Such a tragedy when these things happen. Helena stepped closer, studying his face. Except it wasn't a mining accident. Someone cut her with surgical precision. 3 perfect incisions that would require intimate knowledge of human anatomy. Mining equipment can cause surprisingly clean wounds, Kane said, but his voice had lost some of its warmth. I understand perfectly. Helena's hand moved to the scalpel in her coat pocket. I also understand that you examined Rebecca just 1 week ago, spent 2 hours with her, according to her husband. The pretense finally dropped from Kane's face like a discarded mask. His gentle expression hardened into something cold and calculating. You know, I've been watching your work since I arrived in Tombstone. Such a fascinating reputation you've built, the lady doctor who loses more patients than she saves. Helena's chest tightened. What are you talking about? 3 deaths in 2 months. Mrs. Henderson, the blacksmith's son, that traveling merchant from Tucson, all under your care, all dead despite your best efforts. The names hit Helena like physical blows. Each face was burned into her memory, patients she'd fought to save. Families who turned away from her in grief and anger. You were there, she whispered, the truth dawning. You treated them before I did. Guilty as charged. Kane's smile returned. But now it looked like a wolf baring its teeth. Amazing what a little mercury in the water can do. Or contaminated bandages. Turn even competent medical care into a death sentence. Helena backed toward the door, but Kane was already moving to block her path. In his hand, a surgical knife caught the lamplight. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because you, my dear failed colleague, make the perfect scapegoat for my work. Helena's heart pounded as she realized the full scope of his plan. Every death blamed on her incompetence was actually murder, carefully orchestrated to destroy her reputation while hiding his crimes. But now she knew the truth, and that made her dangerous. Helena's fingers found the loose fence board behind her as Kane stepped into the moonlight, his medical bag swinging like a pendulum, counting down her final moments. You know, Helena, I've been watching you struggle for months, Kane said, his voice smooth as honey poured over broken glass. Every patient you lost, every family that turned away from you, it broke my heart. You're lying, Helena said, feeling the fence board give way. Tell me, what did Mrs. Henderson's baby die from? You said fever, didn't you? The memory hit Helena like a punch to the stomach. Little Tommy Henderson, barely 3 months old, burning with fever that wouldn't break. She'd tried everything. Cool baths, willow bark tea, even the new medicine from back east. Nothing worked. Poison, Helena whispered, the truth dawning. You poisoned him. Kane smiled wider. Just a tiny amount of mercury in his milk. I wanted to see how hard you'd fight for him. Helena's hands shook with rage. He was a baby. He was practice, Kane said, opening his medical bag. The moonlight caught the edge of a surgical knife. Just like Mrs. Patterson's heart condition. Just like old Mr. Garcia's lung sickness. All of them. Practice for what I really wanted. Which was what? To destroy you completely. Kane's mask finally slipped, showing the monster underneath. Do you know what it's like to graduate top of your medical class, only to watch some woman take patients that should have been mine? The sound of horses approaching made them both freeze. Kane cursed and grabbed Helena's wrist, pressing the knife against her throat. Not a sound, he hissed, or I'll cut you here and now. 3 riders passed by on the main street, their voices carrying on the night air. Helena recognized Sheriff Morrison's laugh among them, so close. Yet they had no idea death waited just 30 feet away in the shadows. As the horses faded, Kane relaxed his grip slightly. Helena seized the moment, driving her elbow back into his ribs and pushing through the broken fence board. She tumbled into the alley, scraped and breathless but free. Run all you want, Kane called after her. This town is small, and I know every hiding place. Besides, who's going to believe the failed lady doctor? Helena ran toward the main street, her heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear Kane's footsteps, steady and patient, as a hunter tracking wounded prey. Helena burst through the saloon doors, like a woman fleeing hell itself. The room fell silent, as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Cowboys, miners, gamblers, all frozen with cards and whiskey glasses halfway to their lips. "Help me!" she gasped, blood trickling from where the knife had nicked her throat. "Dr. Kane is trying to kill me." Laughter erupted from a table near the back. "Lady, you been drinking Doc Patterson's medicine again?" called out a miner with gold teeth. Before Helena could answer, the doors swung open again. Kane walked in, calm as Sunday morning, his knife hidden, but his eyes burning with deadly purpose. His hair was perfectly combed, his clothes unwrinkled, looking every inch the respectable physician. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance," he said, his voice carrying that educated Eastern accent that commanded respect. "Dr. Winters has been under tremendous strain lately. The loss of so many patients has affected her mind." Helena felt the room's mood shift against her like a tide turning. These men had heard the stories about her failures. They'd seen the families who no longer trusted her with their loved ones. "She attacked me with a surgical knife," Kane continued, producing the blade and setting it carefully on the bar. "I was forced to defend myself." "That's not true," Helena shouted, but her voice cracked with desperation. "He's been poisoning my patients. He's the reason they died." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Morrison pushed through the batwing doors, drawn by the commotion. "What's all this about?" Morrison asked, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here," Kane said. "Dr. Winters has had some kind of breakdown. She's making wild accusations and threatening people with surgical instruments." Morrison studied Helena's torn dress, her wild hair, the blood on her neck. Then he looked at Kane. Clean, composed, professional. The choice seemed obvious. "Helena, you need to come with me," Morrison said gently. "We'll sort this out at the jail where it's quiet." "No," Helena backed toward the stairs. "Ask Rebecca Caldwell. She knows what really happened to her arm. Those weren't accident cuts. They were surgical." But even as she spoke, Helena could see in their faces that the battle was already lost. Kane had played his role perfectly, and she looked exactly like what he claimed, a broken woman driven mad by her own failures. As rough hands grabbed her arms, Helena saw Kane's smile, small, satisfied, and cold as a winter grave. Helena spent 2 days in jail, listening to Kane's smooth voice outside as he treated patients, and told everyone how tragic her breakdown had been. But on the third day, everything changed. Sheriff Morrison unlocked her cell door, his face grim. "Helena, we need to talk." Behind him stood Rebecca Caldwell, pale but walking, her arms still bandaged but healing. Her eyes held a fire that hadn't been there before. "I remember," Rebecca said simply. "I remember what Dr. Kane did to me." Helena's heart leaped, but Morrison held up his hand. "Tell her what you told me." Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I went to see Dr. Kane because I'd been having headaches. He said he needed to examine my arm to check my circulation, but when he made those cuts," she shuddered. "He smiled, Helena. He actually smiled when I started bleeding." "But you were unconscious when I found you," Helena said. "I pretended to be. I was so scared, I just lay there and let him think I was dying. When I heard voices coming, he ran off." Rebecca's voice grew stronger. "He told me if I ever said anything, he'd come back and finish what he started." Morrison crossed his arms. "That's when I started asking questions around town. Turns out Dr. Kane had been real interested in your patients, Helena. Always asking about their symptoms, their treatments." "There's more," Rebecca said. "This morning, Cookie at the boarding house found something in her salt barrel. Mixed right in with the regular salt was arsenic, enough to poison half the mine." Helena felt the pieces clicking together. He was going to poison all the miners and blame it on the boarding house food. With me locked up, he'd be the only doctor available to treat them. "And when they all died despite his heroic efforts," Morrison said grimly, "nobody would question his story about frontier medicine being dangerous in the wrong hands." A commotion outside made them all turn toward the window. Through the glass, Helena could see townspeople gathering in the street, their voices angry and getting louder. "Word's gotten around," Morrison said. "Folks are pretty upset about being fooled. Dr. Kane barricaded himself in the Murphy place about an hour ago." Helena stood up, feeling strength return to her limbs for the first time in days. "Sheriff, I need to get to my medical bag. If Dr. Kane has any more poison supplies, people might need treatment." Morrison nodded and handed her the keys. "Your bag's in my office. But Helena, be careful. A cornered snake is the most dangerous kind." The sun was setting over Tombstone as Helena walked down Main Street with her medical bag in hand. The townspeople who had scorned her just days before now nodded respectfully as she passed. Children who had hidden behind their mothers' skirts now waved shyly from doorways. Sheriff Morrison and his deputies had surrounded the Murphy place. But Kane wasn't coming out. He'd been shouting threats and demands from inside, his smooth voice finally cracking under pressure. "Dr. Winters!" A familiar voice called out. Helena turned to see James Caldwell running toward her, his face etched with worry. "It's Rebecca. The baby's coming early, and something's wrong." Helena didn't hesitate. She followed James to their small cabin, where she found Rebecca in labor, her face pale with pain and fear. The stress of the past few days had triggered early contractions, and the baby was in distress. For the next 3 hours, Helena worked with steady hands and a calm voice, guiding Rebecca through a difficult birth. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy girl with a strong cry, the cabin filled with tears of joy instead of grief. "She's beautiful," Helena whispered, placing the baby in Rebecca's arms. "Perfect and healthy." "Thank you," Rebecca said, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you for saving us both." As Helena cleaned her instruments, she heard shouting from the direction of Main Street. Through the window, she could see smoke rising from the Murphy place. A crowd had gathered, and Sheriff Morrison was directing his men to form a line. "What's happening?" James asked. Before Helena could answer, Dr. Kane's voice echoed across the town, high and desperate. "You fools, you need me. Without a real doctor, you'll all die from your own ignorance." Then came the sound of breaking glass, followed by screams. Helena grabbed her medical bag and ran toward the commotion, leaving Rebecca safe with her new baby. She arrived to find the Murphy place engulfed in flames. Kane had apparently started the fire himself, either by accident or in a final act of madness. The crowd stood back, watching the building burn. "Is anyone hurt?" Helena called out. "Dr. Kane's still inside," Morrison replied grimly. "Won't come out, even with the place burning down around him." Helena stared at the flames consuming the makeshift medical office where Kane had plotted his murders. Part of her felt she should try to save him. Her oath as a doctor demanded she preserve life, even the life of someone who had tried to destroy her. But as she took a step toward the burning building, a figure appeared in the doorway. Kane stood silhouetted against the flames, his clothes smoking, his face twisted with rage and madness. "This is all your fault," he screamed at Helena. "You should have died quietly like all the others." He raised something in his hand, a gun he must have hidden in his medical supplies. The crowd scattered, but Helena stood her ground, staring at the man who had nearly destroyed her life. "You're right," she called back to him. "I should have died, but I didn't, and now everyone knows what you really are." Kane's laugh was wild and broken. "What I am? I'm what this territory needed. A real doctor who understood that some people don't deserve to live." The flames were growing higher now, licking at the doorframe behind him. Smoke poured from the windows, and the roof began to sag. "Come out of there," Morrison shouted. "We'll give you a fair trial." But Kane was beyond reason now. He raised the gun toward Helena, his hand shaking with rage and madness. "If I can't practice medicine, neither will you." The gunshot echoed across the town. But it wasn't Kane who fired. Sheriff Morrison's rifle had found its mark, and the mad doctor crumpled to the ground just as a burning beam crashed down where he had been standing. The building collapsed in a shower of sparks and flames, taking with it all evidence of Kane's crimes. But the truth had already been spoken, witnessed, and believed. As the fire died down to glowing embers, Helena found herself surrounded by townspeople who had once shunned her. Mrs. Patterson, who had slammed the door in her face just days before, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Winters," she said quietly, "my husband's been having chest pains. Could you take a look at him?" Helena nodded, her heart full. "Of course, that's what I'm here for." 6 months later, Helena sat on her porch in the evening light, watching the children of Tombstone play in the dusty street. Her practice had grown steady and strong. Families trusted her now, not because she was perfect, but because she had proven her dedication to healing over and over again. Rebecca Caldwell walked by, carrying her healthy daughter, and waved to Helena with genuine warmth. James had fully recovered from his injuries in the mine, and their family was thriving. Helena opened the letter that had arrived that morning from the Territorial Medical Board. They wanted to offer her a position in Phoenix, working at the new hospital there. It was a chance for advancement, for prestige, for everything she had once dreamed of. But as she looked around at the town that had finally accepted her, Helena realized she had found something more valuable than prestige. She had found her purpose. She folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Tomorrow, she would write her reply, thanking them for the offer, but explaining that Tombstone needed her, and she needed Tombstone. The sun set over the Arizona Territory, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. In the distance, Helena could hear the sounds of the silver mine, where men worked hard to build better lives for their families. And in her cabin at the end of Main Street, Dr. Helena Winters prepared for another day of healing, knowing that she had finally found her place in the world. The lady doctor of Tombstone had proven that truth, like good medicine, might take time to work, but it would always triumph in the end.